Welcome to Teen Up, a podcast that digs deeper into the thoughts of teenagers' minds about the wonders of the world.
If you're new here, I am your host, Isabella.
And I'm Glenn. If you're not, welcome back.
Here's a quick disclaimer. If we made any mistakes, please email us and tell us. Thank you.
Mental health issues do not restrict to one person. When one is undergoing a mental illness, the people around them are affected as well, such as family members. Today, we're going to talk about mental health in families. Events such as divorce, domestic violence, or parents fighting could all cause children to develop mental illnesses.
As we have talked about in a past season, I believe it was season 15 when we talked about parenting, parents really do have a profound impact on kids at their childhood stages. And different parenting styles really affects how a kid grows up to be. Just like a really interesting fact that I read online today, it was a research saying that back then, you know how like back then people were really religious and like Christians, like those Americans were really religious and stuff. They would say that a child is from heaven or the child is from hell or something like that, because they think that maybe that child turns out to be like a little bit more rebellious. They would say that the child came from hell and that God made this child to be rebellious. But like later on through research, like scientific research, they realized that this is not the case. Like God and religion isn't in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And this really has to do with the parenting style and stuff like that. Like this stuck out to me because those people don't blame the parents for how they bring up their kids. They blame God for like bringing them this rebellious kid instead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one kind of parenting style is permissive. So permissive parents, would be letting their kids do whatever they want and not really, care for anything and not really set certain specific rules.
Mm-hmm.
And they would instead use reason and manipulation to take control of his or her children, like kind of like a passive aggressive way. And that would lead to the kid growing up to not know consequences or a lack of self-regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this would further affect the kid's mental health in the future, like in school, which we talked about in the past episode.
Yeah.
And that would lead to the kid, maybe not saying that becoming the one that bullies others, but I think this is a potential because they never learned about consequences or learn about the things that they shouldn't do.
Yeah, I would say it makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But like, would this type of parenting style cause any mental health issue?
I think this doesn't really cause any specific type of mental health issues. I would say that those parents who are more controlling would cause more like anxiety or depression instead. Because permissive parents, they don't really put as much pressure or stress on a kid because they don't set down the rules.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Another type of parenting style is authoritarian. And this is basically trying to like control everything in a kid's life and using really cold ways to make a kid do something, to force a child to do chores or not do things like maybe spilling water and using really severe consequences to deal with this type of stuff. And this would lead, like I said, this child to develop perhaps anxiety and depression. They're always fearful of what a superior might do to them because they did something wrong. And I think this really roots back to how their parents were teaching them and how their parents were treating them as a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely like agree. And I think this would develop this type of parenting style could potentially develop more mental health issues in a way, just by the fact that some of them might be, beaten when they're young, or some might even suffer from like abuse in a way.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think the way that a parent is brought up and the way that they're treating their children is like how they're treating their children is a choice, but how they were brought up is not a choice. So, but I get it. Like when the parent has anxiety, like for themselves, because they were always taught to stand tall, don't slouch, or something like that. They would want to put this pressure on their kids as well because that's what they were taught to do.
Yeah, I think what you said was super important, that how a parent is brought up is not by their choice, but how they want to teach their children is their choice.
Mhm.
And they should make a good one. And, it's not like blaming it on how they're brought up is not a good excuse.
Mhm.
Um, Nobody should use it as an excuse to treat their children poorly,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
it is just a terrible thing to do.
Mhm.
And it is completely up to you as an independent adult to choose how to treat your children. And this burden shouldn't fall back onto your parents, which is just weird. I
Mhm.
mean, unless it's like grandparents bring them up,
Mhm. Mhm.
which is like a totally different topic.
Yeah. Okay. Now moving on to this other type of parenting style is authoritative. So the difference between this one and the last one is that the last one was basically just strict and cold, while this one is strict, warm, meaning that sometimes they would show their loving side a little bit more, and they would tell their kids to not do something but never like force it on them. They care about what their kids are doing but never really actually force it like an authoritarian parent. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, is it like a more passive aggressive way?
Yeah, I guess that kind of works. Like this type of parent would, recognize the child's individual's interests and unique ways and unique personalities, yet they would still try to enforce their own perspectives. I think this is really similar to like we talked about in season 15 about helicopter parents. I think in some type of way this is similar.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say maybe what you're describing is not passive aggressive per se. It is
Mhm.
just that what you're saying kind of means that there is a possibility for these parents to be passive aggressive, which can also be
Mhm.
another issue for children, I'd
Mhm.
say.
Like in the future, when this child grows up, I think they would kind of maybe they would develop also anxiety for sure because they're unsure of what they're doing because they've always had a parent to tell them what to do and to tell them how to do it. But when they grow up, there isn't someone to tell them how to deal with different things, and that would cause anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. So now that we've talked a little bit about how parenting styles may affect a child's mental health in the future, some parents would be dealing with mental illness themselves when they are parenting kids.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, like in a lot of movies and series. Like I'm very used to referring to a lot of like these movies and series because I've never actually experienced any of these like really dramatic problems in my life. But in movies, they would say that the parent is maybe a drug addict, and this would cause the children or the child to be the caretaker of the family because their parent is experiencing, drug addiction and stuff like that. And I think that is really take a toll on the kids because they would have to start being an adult at a very young age when they're not supposed to be an adult. They're supposed to be out in the field having fun. But instead, they're going back home and seeing a drug addict not doing anything, someone that is supposed to be there for them but is not. And I think that is a very difficult situation and something that no one should really go through.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, this happens. And it's actually like these kids who have to deal with parents with mental illness, they would more likely to have to develop mental illness themselves afterwards because, taking care of a parent and still going to school and dealing with like friend issues, they're really oppressing a lot of their emotion, and that would lead to, issues.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely makes sense.
After the break, we're just going to talk more about mental illness in families.
Parenting can be tough, but sharing stories, even the tough ones, are how we come together and strengthen our village. Connect with your team through these stories. Welcome to Our Village Stories, parenting through passion and grit. To become a villager, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. Now we're going to get more into our topic.
Before we get into like the family stuff, relationship breakups actually a very big part in mental health issues too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important that when you're going through like a relationship breakup, you know to talk to somebody or get the support that you need. And remember that you should, take care of yourself and really love yourself during this period, because it's kind of like you're losing someone that you love. And it could cause mental illness if you don't properly take care of your emotions, because again, it builds up and you might have a life crisis later in life, and it might even stop you from going into another relationship because you weren't able to walk out of this one.
Yeah. Like we said in the past episodes, like traumatic, right?
So now moving on, one person having a mental illness could really affect a whole family, because now your whole family's routines, activities, and even like maybe there might even be financial issues. All of that could really affect a family. I personally don't know anyone who's properly diagnosed with mental illness in my family, but like I could feel that if my sister is having like a bad day and she's kind of like falling maybe into a depression or like a very low mood, it really affects a whole family's dynamics, and the people who care for her would try to, schedule our things around her to cheer her up or things like that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Because, you live with your family, and if you talk on a daily basis, you can definitely feel that, and your emotional problems will definitely become each other's toll. Not in a bad way, though. More like in a caring way, but an excessive amount could definitely, cause other people's mental health issues.
So, like we said before the break about, parents with mental health issues themselves, it's very important that your kids or like your family all together has like a crisis plan for this. Like when you have like a huge breakdown. I think this is really similar to like if one of your parents has a physical illness as well. Like maybe one of your parents is experiencing like cancer. It's really important to have a crisis plan for your kids, because then they wouldn't get the financial support that they used to have, and the whole family dynamic would change. And if your kids are really young or like infants, you should really teach them how to like at least prepare them and let them understand that this is something that might happen. So now that we've talked about like parents with mental illness, parenting a child experiencing mental illness is also another thing. Like I said, like the first half of this episode, this mental illness could really be developed from how like the parent taught their kids. Like again, using my family as an example, I feel like not that my parents did a horrible job. Like, they did fine. I turned out fine. I like who I am. I don't have any mental health issues that I know of yet, and hopefully will never have any. Hopefully, but I have slight anxiety. But hopefully, yeah, I do see that how, like, I feel like my parents' parenting styles change throughout each kid. But I don't know if this has to do with the thing like your firstborn, people like you more because you're the first kid, and the middle child you get forgotten, and the last child everybody loves you, and or like don't really care what you do because or stuff like I don't know if that relates to that, but I could see how differently our minds work, like different siblings, how our minds are different, and how some of them are more prone to mental health illness because of how my parents taught them as a child.
Yeah, I would say like it would definitely cause like a difference between different people. And I mean it's especially for you because you have a lot of siblings compared to me.
Mhm.
You have
You
an
have none.
infinite amount compared to me because I have 0.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like for you, you can see even for the same parents, you bring up different kids that are dealing with different issues in their life. But at the same time, I'm thinking like it can also mean that it is not just about the parents. It could be, related to a lot of things. Just like how we talked about in the previous season. I feel like at this point we have talked about a lot of stuff.
That's true.
That parenting, we don't really know like which part of parenting affects what, and we cannot pinpoint that. And especially like for mental health issues, we cannot pinpoint like which event started this. Even for like therapists or professionals, when they're looking at a patient, they can only guess that it could like contribute to that issue. Like say you were beaten when you're young, that could contribute to something, but they're not for sure about it,
Yeah, I think that is a very valid point. There's no one can really for sure say what caused what because they're all interconnected. And like even yourself, you can't tell because you probably don't even have the memory of being like talked down to for the very first time in your life. Like that is not I mean, it could be like a very traumatic experience for some people, but some people don't even remember it. Like you thought it was just a small thing, and the parents would think that, oh, it's just a small thing that for the first time I scold my kid or something like that. Well, I think overall, mental health in families could stem from various things. Like we said, also like divorce and domestic violence. Like divorce is such a traumatic thing for a lot of people because of how their parents dealt with it, like constant fighting. That is most likely to be very traumatic for kids because like maybe that would cause them to never trust love again or something like that. But
just thinking about like Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Yeah. Yeah, but like for sure, how the parents dealt with divorce is super important to a kid's brought up. And of course, domestic violence does not do good on anyone.
Yeah, when you're talking about divorce, I'm thinking about Marriage Story, the film. I mean, in the film, I don't think it necessarily portrays how it affects the children. I think it touches on that, but it didn't focus on this part. But it definitely is something that is very influential to a kid, especially with like the custodies and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I totally agree to what you said. Since that we've talked about both school and family situations, next week we're going to go into a broader sense, social media. Thank you for listening to this episode.
We will upload a new episode every Thursday.
Remember to like, follow, and share our podcasts with your friends and family. You could also share your idea and thoughts with us on our Instagram at teenup.podcast.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel. Thank you and bye.